I sat in my government security office at 3 a.m., staring at classified encryption codes on multiple monitors, when my manager Derek stormed in with 2 security guards. "Your clearance expired yesterday. Pack your desk. Security will escort you out." But I knew my clearance didn't expire for 18 months. As guards hovered over me, I watched Derek's smug expression and realized this wasn't about expired credentials. This was about the promotion Derek promised his college buddy Jason. But what Derek didn't know was that I discovered something that could destroy them all. 6 months earlier, my life had been completely different. I was Frida Martinez, lead cryptographer for military intelligence, and I loved my work. Every morning I walked into the secure facility 30 miles outside Washington, D.C., with genuine excitement. Creating and breaking encryption codes that protected American military communications worldwide wasn't just my job, it was my calling. The problem started when Derek Thompson arrived as our new department manager. Unlike our previous supervisors who came from military or intelligence backgrounds, Derek had spent his career in private cybersecurity firms. He wore expensive suits that looked out of place in our utilitarian government building, and he immediately began talking about modernizing operations and streamlining personnel. During his first month, Derek announced he was hiring an additional cryptographer to support the expanding workload. When he introduced Jason Walsh at the monthly staff meeting, I knew something was wrong. Jason's resume listed a computer science degree from a decent state school and 3 years at a software company, but cryptography requires specialized training and security clearance that takes years to obtain. After the meeting, I approached Derek privately. I reviewed Jason's background. He doesn't have cryptographic experience or the necessary clearance level for our classified projects. Derek's jaw tightened. "Jason is highly qualified. He was my college roommate, and I know his capabilities personally. But Derek, our encryption protocols protect communications for special operations overseas. One mistake could—" "Are you questioning my judgment, Frida?" His voice carried a warning that made my stomach clench. "Jason brings fresh perspectives from the private sector. Maybe it's time we moved beyond outdated government thinking." Over the following weeks, Derek's attitude toward me shifted dramatically. He stopped including me in planning meetings, questioned my project timelines, and began reviewing my work with unnecessary scrutiny. Meanwhile, Jason received preferential treatment, despite his obvious struggles with even basic cryptographic concepts. The breaking point came during a classified briefing about a new encryption system protecting communications for troops in the Middle East. Jason asked questions that revealed he didn't understand fundamental principles that any qualified cryptographer would know instinctively. When I tried to explain the concepts, Derek cut me off. "Jason learns differently than you do, Frida. Not everyone needs to approach problems the same way. But cryptography isn't about different approaches. It's about mathematical precision and security protocols that protect lives." I started documenting Jason's mistakes and Derek's interference with standard procedures. 3 months ago, I discovered Jason had been accessing classification levels beyond his authorized clearance. When I reported this to Derek, he dismissed my concerns as territorial behavior and suggested I focus on collaboration instead of competition. That night in my apartment, I realized Derek wasn't just playing favorites, he was creating a dangerous security risk. I began keeping detailed records of every protocol violation, every unauthorized access, every instance where Derek covered for Jason's incompetence. The situation escalated rapidly. Derek started scheduling important meetings when I wasn't available, excluded me from project briefings, and began spreading rumors that I was resistant to change and difficult to work with. Other colleagues, fearing for their own jobs under Derek's new leadership, avoided defending me. 2 weeks ago, Derek called me into his office. "Frida, I've been reviewing your performance, and frankly, your attitude has become problematic. You seem unable to adapt to our evolving work environment. My work quality has been consistently excellent. I've never received negative performance reviews. Performance isn't just about technical skills, it's about teamwork and flexibility." Derek's condescending tone made my hands shake with anger. "I'm placing you on a performance improvement plan." The improvement plan was clearly designed to document reasons for termination. Derek assigned me impossible deadlines, excluded me from resources I needed to complete assignments, and scheduled mandatory meetings during times when I was supposed to be working on his assigned projects. It was a trap with no possible successful outcome. That brought me to 3 a.m. on Tuesday morning, working late to meet one of Derek's impossible deadlines. I had been reviewing encryption protocols for a classified military operation when Derek stormed in with security guards. "Pack your personal items. Your clearance expired yesterday, and you're no longer authorized to be in this building." I pulled up my clearance documentation on my computer screen. "Derek, look at this. My clearance doesn't expire until June 2026. It's clearly stated right here. The system shows expired status. Security has already been notified." He gestured to the guards. "Please escort Miss Martinez from the building immediately." As I packed my desk contents into a cardboard box, my hands trembling with shock and rage, I noticed Derek watching my every move. He was particularly interested in my computer files, and I realized he was waiting for me to leave so Jason could take over my projects immediately. Sandra from Human Resources appeared with termination paperwork. "This documents the expiration of your security clearance and termination of employment effective immediately." "This is completely false. My clearance is valid for 18 more months." Sandra avoided eye contact. "The documentation shows expired status. I'm sorry, but there's nothing I can do." Walking through the building with security escorts was humiliating. Coworkers I had worked with for years stared as I carried my box of personal items past their desks. Some looked sympathetic but afraid to speak. Others seemed relieved it wasn't happening to them. At the building exit, Derek made a show of collecting my security badge and access cards. "Good luck in your future endeavors, Frida. I hope you'll consider this a learning experience about workplace cooperation." Standing in the parking lot at 4 a.m. holding a box of desk decorations and coffee mugs, I felt more betrayed than I had ever felt in my life. Derek had systematically destroyed my career to promote his unqualified friend, and everyone else had either participated or stayed silent. But as I drove home, something nagged at the back of my mind. I reached into my purse and felt the small USB drive I kept there, a backup drive I used for personal files and sometimes forgot about. Suddenly I remembered that 3 weeks ago, when Derek started limiting my computer access, I had copied some work files onto this drive so I could finish projects at home. Files that Derek didn't know existed. Files that might prove what Jason had really been doing with his unauthorized access to classified systems. Back in my studio apartment, I sat on my couch staring at the USB drive, afraid of what I might find. Using my personal laptop, which had no connection to government networks, I opened the backup files I had created weeks earlier. What I discovered made my blood run cold. The files contained logs showing Jason accessing classified encryption keys for military operations in Eastern Europe and Southeast Asia. These weren't mistakes or authorized training exercises. These were deliberate downloads of some of our most sensitive information. Jason had been systematically copying encryption protocols that protected communications for American Special Forces operating in hostile territory. My hands shook as I scrolled through timestamp after timestamp showing Jason's unauthorized access. Each breach represented potential danger for military personnel whose communications depended on these encryption systems remaining secure. If this information reached foreign intelligence services, soldiers could die. I called the only person I trusted completely, Colonel Patricia Hayes, my former mentor, who had recruited me for government cryptography work 7 years ago. Patricia had retired 18 months earlier, but maintained her security clearance and contacts throughout the intelligence community. "Patricia, I need to see you urgently. I can't discuss this over the phone, but it involves a serious security breach at my facility." We arranged to meet at a small coffee shop in Arlington that Patricia knew was far from any government buildings or surveillance concerns. When I arrived, Patricia was already seated in a corner booth, her gray hair pulled back in the same practical style she had worn during her military service. "Frida, you look terrible. What happened?" I explained Derek's systematic harassment, my termination based on false claims about my security clearance, and Jason's promotion to my position. Then I showed her the files on my USB drive. Patricia's expression grew grave as she reviewed the data. "This is incredibly serious. Jason has accessed encryption keys that protect some of our most sensitive operations. If this information has been compromised..." She paused, processing the implications. "Have you reported this through official channels?" Derek dismissed every concern I raised about Jason. He accused me of being territorial and difficult. Then he fired me before I could escalate the issue. "Derek may be more involved than you realize." Patricia closed the laptop and leaned forward. "I've heard disturbing rumors about your department from colleagues still active in intelligence circles. There have been questions about unauthorized personnel changes and security protocols being relaxed." She explained the proper procedures for reporting security breaches to FBI counterintelligence and military criminal investigation units. But she also warned me that without my official position, my credibility might be questioned, especially since Derek had documented my termination as related to performance and cooperation issues. We need more evidence before we approach federal investigators. Can you access additional documentation about Jason's background and Derek's decision-making process? Over the next 3 days, Patricia used her connections to help me gather information. A former colleague in personnel records confirmed that Jason's security clearance had been expedited through irregular channels, bypassing standard background investigations. Another contact in facilities management provided building access logs showing Jason staying in the office until very late hours when no supervisors were present. The most damning evidence came from security camera footage that Patricia obtained through a friend in building security. The recordings showed Jason photographing classified documents displayed on computer screens using his personal cell phone. He would wait until the office was nearly empty, then systematically photograph encryption protocols and classification codes. But the footage revealed something even more shocking. In one recording from 2 weeks ago, Derek entered the office late at night and handed Jason a list of specific encryption keys to access. Derek wasn't just enabling Jason's unauthorized activities, he was directing them. "Frida, this isn't just about getting a friend hired. This is organized espionage." Patricia's voice was grim as we reviewed the footage in her home office. Derek is actively coordinating the theft of classified information. We discovered that Derek had been falsifying security reports for months, covering up Jason's unauthorized access by claiming the activities were part of legitimate training exercises. Every breach had been documented as approved supervisory instruction, creating a false paper trail that would protect Derek if questions arose. The scope of the conspiracy became clear when Patricia showed me additional security footage from the building's parking garage. 2 days before my termination, Jason met with a man Patricia recognized from FBI surveillance photos as a known operative for foreign intelligence services. The meeting lasted only minutes, but the exchange was obvious. Jason handed the man a small package likely containing copied encryption keys or protocol documents and received what appeared to be an envelope in return. This wasn't just unauthorized access to classified materials. This was active espionage, and Derek had fired me to prevent me from discovering it. Patricia contacted FBI counterintelligence through secure channels she had established during her military career. Within 24 hours, we met with Agent Sarah Rodriguez at a safe house in suburban Maryland. Agent Rodriguez was a 12-year veteran of counterintelligence operations, and her reaction to our evidence confirmed my worst fears about the situation's severity. The encryption system Jason has been accessing protects communications for military operations in 6 different countries, Agent Rodriguez explained as she reviewed the USB files and security footage. If these protocols have been compromised, we're looking at potential threats to thousands of American personnel and allied forces. She revealed that the FBI had been tracking the foreign operative Jason met with for 8 months, but they hadn't been able to identify his source inside the American intelligence community. Our evidence provided the missing connection they needed to understand how classified information was being extracted. Derek Thompson has been under financial pressure for over a year. Agent Rodriguez continued showing us financial records the FBI had obtained through banking surveillance. He owes nearly $200,000 to illegal gambling operations in Atlantic City. His private sector salary was substantial, but his gambling addiction consumed everything he earned. The timeline became clear. Derek's gambling debts had made him vulnerable to foreign recruitment. When he received the government position managing our cryptography department, he gained access to personnel files and security clearances that allowed him to identify potential targets for compromise. Instead of recruiting existing employees who might resist or report suspicious approaches, Derek created his own asset by hiring Jason and facilitating his access to classified systems. Jason Walsh has no gambling debts, no apparent financial pressures, and no obvious motivation for espionage, Agent Rodriguez explained. But our investigation suggests he's been promised significant money and assistance relocating to a country without extradition agreements with the United States. Derek convinced him this was a short-term intelligence gathering operation that would make them both wealthy. The FBI had been monitoring Derek's communications for several weeks before my termination, but they hadn't moved to arrest him because they wanted to identify the full extent of his network and gather evidence of actual intelligence transfers. My firing had accelerated their timeline because it suggested Derek felt confident enough to eliminate oversight and expand the operation. Derek planned to promote Jason to your exact position, giving him access to even more sensitive encryption systems, Agent Rodriguez said. Your termination wasn't just about removing an obstacle, it was about positioning Jason for greater access to classified materials. She showed me classified briefings about recent security breaches that had puzzled intelligence analysts. Communications intercepts suggested foreign intelligence services had gained access to American military encryption keys, but counterintelligence investigators hadn't been able to identify the source. Several ongoing operations had been compromised, forcing military commanders to alter plans and potentially putting personnel at risk. 3 other cryptographers in your department have been transferred or terminated in recent months under questionable circumstances, Agent Rodriguez revealed. Derek has been systematically removing experienced personnel who might notice security violations and replacing them with people he can control. The pattern was clear and terrifying. Derek wasn't planning a single intelligence theft, he was establishing long-term foreign access to American military communications. Jason was just the first of several assets Derek planned to position throughout the cryptography department. But Agent Rodriguez had encouraging news about the investigation's progress. Military police criminal investigators have been reviewing reports of compromised encryption protocols. They don't know about Derek's involvement yet, but they're scheduled to visit your facility tomorrow morning to interview the lead cryptographer about recent security concerns. She smiled grimly. Derek thinks he's eliminated the threat by firing you. He doesn't realize that military investigators are already closing in, and he doesn't know we've been monitoring his activities. Tomorrow morning, when military police arrive looking for the lead cryptographer, Derek will direct them to Jason, and Jason will be arrested for espionage. The FBI's plan was elegant in its simplicity. They would allow Derek to believe his scheme had succeeded while gathering final evidence of the intelligence transfers. Jason would be arrested with access to classified systems, providing definitive proof of espionage. Derek's reaction to Jason's arrest would likely reveal the extent of his own involvement and potentially expose other conspirators. We need your cooperation for the final phase of this investigation, Agent Rodriguez said. Derek may contact you to ensure your silence about the circumstances of your termination. If he does, we'd like you to wear a recording device and encourage him to discuss Jason's qualifications and the reasons for your firing. I agreed immediately. The thought of Derek and Jason selling American military secrets while destroying my career made me determined to help expose their betrayal. Agent Rodriguez provided me with a sophisticated recording device disguised as a normal smartphone case, along with specific questions to ask if Derek contacted me. As we prepared to leave the safe house, Agent Rodriguez delivered news that made everything personal. The encryption keys Jason accessed last month protected communications for a special operations unit in Eastern Europe. 2 weeks after those keys were compromised, that unit's communications were intercepted and their location was exposed to hostile forces. 3 American soldiers were killed in the resulting ambush. Derek and Jason weren't just stealing abstract information. Their espionage had directly contributed to American deaths. Tomorrow's arrests couldn't come soon enough. Agent Rodriguez's plan required precise timing and careful coordination between FBI counterintelligence and military police criminal investigators. While I waited at home for Derek's expected contact, federal agents positioned surveillance equipment to monitor Derek's communications and movements. The call came Tuesday evening exactly as Agent Rodriguez had predicted. Derek's voice carried false concern and barely concealed anxiety. Frida, I hope you're adjusting well to the transition. I wanted to follow up about some administrative details regarding your departure. I activated the recording device Agent Rodriguez had provided. What kind of administrative details? Well, there are confidentiality agreements related to the classified projects you worked on. Standard procedure requires former employees to sign documentation acknowledging their ongoing obligations regarding sensitive information. Derek was fishing to see whether I planned to challenge my termination or report suspicious activities I had observed. His request for a confidentiality agreement was actually an attempt to legally prevent me from discussing Jason's unauthorized access or Derek's violations of security protocols. Following Agent Rodriguez's coaching, I pressed Derek for specific information about my firing. I'm still confused about my security clearance supposedly expiring. Could you explain exactly what happened with that? There was a long pause before Derek responded. Sometimes administrative systems show discrepancies. The important thing is that we followed proper procedures based on the information available to us. But Derek, I checked my clearance status multiple times. It clearly showed valid until 2026. How could there be a discrepancy that significant? Frida, I think you're overthinking this. Personnel decisions are complex, and sometimes multiple factors contribute to necessary changes. His voice became more strained. The point is that Jason is doing excellent work in the position, and the department is functioning smoothly. I pushed harder, knowing the FBI was recording every word. Jason seems nice, but he's been asking me questions about encryption protocols that suggest he might not have the background for such sensitive work. Are you confident he has the necessary qualifications? Derek's response revealed more than he intended. Jason brings different skills to the position. He's been very effective at accessing and analyzing the various systems he needs to work with. In fact, he's been staying late most evenings to familiarize himself with all aspects of the job. All aspects of the job was a telling phrase, especially combined with Derek's knowledge that Jason had been staying late. Derek was essentially admitting he knew about Jason's after-hours activities accessing classified systems. What specific systems has Jason been working with? I asked, following the script Agent Rodriguez had provided. He's been reviewing the full range of encryption protocols and classification systems. I've given him broad access so he can quickly develop expertise in all areas. Derek paused, seeming to realize he was revealing too much. But these are internal matters that don't concern you anymore, Frida. The recording device captured Derek's admission that he had personally granted Jason broad access to encryption systems beyond what any new employee should receive. Combined with the security footage of Derek providing Jason with specific lists of systems to access this conversation, would provide crucial evidence of Derek's active participation in the espionage conspiracy. Derek, I hope Jason understands the serious responsibilities involved in handling classified encryption keys. When I was in that position, I always felt the weight of knowing that mistakes could endanger military personnel. Jason understands his responsibilities perfectly. Derek's voice carried irritation at my continued questions. He's been very conscientious about documenting his access to various systems and maintaining proper records of his activities. Another damaging admission. Derek knew Jason was accessing multiple classified systems and believed Jason was documenting those activities. In Derek's mind, this documentation probably provided cover for unauthorized access, but in reality, it would serve as evidence of systematic espionage. I decided to push Derek toward revealing his financial motivations. I hope the department has adequate funding for the expanded operations you mentioned. Government budgets can be tight, and sometimes managers have to be creative about resources. Derek's response was cautious, but telling. We've identified some alternative funding sources for special projects. Sometimes private sector connections can provide opportunities that traditional government channels don't offer. Alternative funding sources was a euphemism for payments from foreign intelligence services. Derek was indirectly admitting he had been receiving money from outside sources for his espionage activities. As our conversation continued, Derek became increasingly insistent that I sign confidentiality documentation immediately. His urgency suggested he knew military investigators were asking questions about security breaches and wanted to prevent me from cooperating with any investigation. Frida, I really need you to come in tomorrow morning to handle these administrative matters. It's important that we finalize everything promptly. Tomorrow morning might be difficult for me. Is there a particular reason this needs to be handled so quickly? There are some external reviews of our security procedures scheduled soon. It would be best if all personnel matters were completely resolved before those reviews begin. Derek knew military police were coming, and he was desperate to ensure I couldn't provide information that might expose his conspiracy. His attempt to rush me into signing legal agreements prohibiting me from discussing department activities was evidence of his consciousness of guilt. By the end of our conversation, Derek had provided recorded admissions of granting Jason unauthorized access to classified systems, knowledge of Jason's after-hours activities, receipt of alternative funding for special projects, and urgent concern about impending security reviews. The FBI had everything they needed to demonstrate Derek's active participation in espionage. As I hung up the phone, I felt a mixture of satisfaction and anticipation. Tomorrow morning, when military police arrived to arrest the lead cryptographer, Derek's carefully constructed conspiracy would collapse. Jason would be arrested, Derek would be exposed, and justice would finally be served for their betrayal of American national security. Wednesday morning began like any other day at the government facility, except Derek Thompson felt more confident than he had in months. He arrived at 8 a.m. wearing his most expensive suit, believing he had successfully eliminated every threat to his espionage operation. Jason was settled into my former position with full access to classified systems. I had been neutralized through termination, and Derek expected to finalize my silence with confidentiality agreements later that day. Derek spent his first hour reviewing Jason's latest intelligence-gathering activities. Jason had worked until nearly midnight Tuesday, downloading encryption protocols for military communications systems, protecting American operations in 3 different regions. The information would be transferred to foreign contacts within days, generating another substantial payment for Derek's gambling debts. At 9:15 a.m., Derek was reviewing financial projections for payments he expected to receive from foreign intelligence services when his assistant knocked on his office door. "Mr. Thompson, there are 2 military police officers in the lobby asking to speak with the lead cryptographer. Should I direct them to Jason's desk?" Derek felt a moment of panic before reassuring himself that this was probably routine security verification. Military police occasionally visited government facilities to update security protocols or verify clearance statuses. Since Jason now held the lead cryptographer position, any official inquiries would naturally be directed to him. "Yes, send them to Jason. Make sure he has everything he needs to answer their questions professionally." Derek watched through his office window as 2 serious-looking military officers walked through the main work area toward Jason's desk. Captain Michael Torres wore dress blues with ribbons indicating combat service and security specializations. Sergeant Lisa Chen carried a briefcase and documentation that suggested this was more than a routine visit. Jason looked nervous as the officers approached, but Derek assumed this was normal anxiety about speaking with military investigators. Jason had been coached on how to explain his rapid promotion and expanded access to classified systems. Derek had prepared cover stories about Jason's accelerated clearance process and comprehensive training program. Captain Torres spoke in a voice that carried throughout the quiet office space. "Jason Walsh, you are under arrest for espionage, unauthorized access to classified materials, and conspiracy to commit treason against the United States." The words hit Derek like a physical blow. This wasn't a routine security review. This was a targeted arrest based on specific intelligence about Jason's activities. Derek watched in horror as Sergeant Chen handcuffed Jason and began reading his rights. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you." Other employees stopped working to stare at the unfolding arrest. Jason's face had gone pale, and he was stammering protests about misunderstandings and mistaken identity. "There's been a mistake," Jason said, his voice shaking. "I'm just doing my job. Derek Thompson is my supervisor. He authorized all of my access to classified systems." Derek felt his stomach drop as Jason immediately began pointing to him as responsible for the unauthorized activities. This was exactly what Derek had feared most. Jason would panic and reveal Derek's involvement to save himself. Captain Torres looked toward Derek's office. "We'll be speaking with Mr. Thompson as well. This investigation involves multiple individuals and extensive security violations." Derek realized he needed to distance himself from Jason immediately. He walked out of his office and approached the military police with what he hoped appeared to be surprised concern. "Officers, I'm Derek Thompson, department manager. Is there some kind of problem with Jason? He's only been in the lead cryptographer position for a few days." "Mr. Thompson, Jason Walsh has been under surveillance for unauthorized access to classified encryption systems and contact with foreign intelligence operatives. Are you aware of these activities?" Derek tried to look shocked. "Absolutely not. If Jason has been involved in unauthorized activities, I had no knowledge of them. I promoted him based on his qualifications and expected him to follow all security protocols." But Jason, now handcuffed and facing decades in prison, was desperate to negotiate cooperation. "Derek, tell them the truth. You gave me the lists of systems to access. You told me which encryption keys to download. You arranged the meetings with—" "Jason, I have no idea what you're talking about," Derek interrupted, his voice rising with panic. "I never instructed you to access unauthorized systems or meet with anyone." Sergeant Chen pulled Derek aside. "Mr. Thompson, we need to ask you some questions about security procedures and personnel decisions in your department. Would you prefer to speak privately, or should we conduct this interview at our office? Derek realized the situation was spiraling beyond his control. Military police don't make arrests without extensive evidence, and they clearly knew details about activities Derek thought were completely secret. But he still believed he could maintain plausible deniability about Jason's espionage activities. I'm happy to answer any questions here. I want to cooperate fully with your investigation. As Derek tried to explain Jason's rapid promotion and expanded access as routine personnel decisions, FBI agents entered the building. Agent Sarah Rodriguez approached with federal arrest warrants and additional evidence that would destroy Derek's carefully constructed denials. The arrest happened quickly and professionally. Captain Torres read Derek his rights while Sergeant Chen secured classified materials from both Derek's office and Jason's workstation. Other employees watched in stunned silence as their department manager was handcuffed and escorted toward the building exit. But Derek's panic overcame his judgment in those final moments. As FBI agents began seizing his computer and files, Derek shouted at Jason across the office, "You idiot! You weren't supposed to get caught. I told you to be more careful about the timing and the transfers." Every person in the office heard Derek's outburst, including the military police and FBI agents. In his desperation to blame Jason for poor operational security, Derek had confessed to knowledge of timing and transfers that could only refer to espionage activities. Derek realized his mistake immediately, but the damage was irreversible. His own words had become evidence of his participation in the conspiracy he was trying to deny. Agent Rodriguez smiled grimly as she added Derek's spontaneous confession to the evidence file. "Derek Thompson, you're under arrest for espionage, conspiracy, and treason. Your statement just now will be included in the charges against you." As Derek was led from the building in handcuffs, he saw his entire conspiracy collapsing in a single morning. Jason's arrest had triggered exactly the panic reaction that exposed Derek's involvement. The espionage network Derek had spent months constructing was completely destroyed by his own words and Jason's desperate attempts at cooperation. The office remained silent as FBI agents continued securing classified materials and documenting the extent of the security breach. Employees who had watched Derek systematically harass and terminate qualified personnel over recent months were beginning to understand the true scope of his betrayal. Within hours of Derek and Jason's arrests, FBI agents executed search warrants at Derek's home and personal bank accounts, uncovering evidence that revealed the conspiracy's full scope. Derek's home office contained detailed financial records showing payments totaling over $300,000 from foreign intelligence services organized in a sophisticated accounting system that tracked specific information transfers and their corresponding compensation. Agent Rodriguez called me that afternoon to explain what investigators had discovered. Derek kept meticulous records of his espionage activities, probably to ensure he received proper payment for each piece of intelligence he provided. His documentation will make prosecution straightforward. The financial records showed that Derek's gambling debts had made him vulnerable to foreign recruitment 18 months before he received the government position managing our cryptography department. Foreign intelligence operatives had approached Derek initially to gather information about government security procedures and personnel. But when Derek gained access to classified systems, the relationship evolved into systematic espionage. Derek received his largest payments for recruiting and positioning Jason Walsh in your former role, Agent Rodriguez continued. Foreign services paid Derek $50,000 specifically for arranging Jason's access to military encryption systems. They were planning to pay him another $100,000 once Jason gained access to the quantum encryption project scheduled for implementation next month. I was called to testify before a military tribunal investigating the security breach and its impact on ongoing operations. The hearing took place in a secure facility where military prosecutors presented evidence of how Derek and Jason's espionage had affected American military operations worldwide. Colonel Patricia Hayes accompanied me to provide support and help explain the technical aspects of the compromised encryption systems. Her presence lent credibility to my testimony and demonstrated that respected military intelligence professionals supported my account of events. The tribunal revealed that encryption keys stolen by Jason had been used by foreign intelligence services to intercept and decode American military communications in Eastern Europe, Southeast Asia, and the Middle East. The intercepted communications had revealed troop movements, operational plans, and intelligence-gathering activities that foreign services used to counter American strategic objectives. 3 American soldiers were killed when their unit's communications were intercepted, and their location was revealed to hostile forces, the military prosecutor explained. The encryption keys protecting those communications were among those stolen by Jason Walsh and sold through Derek Thompson's espionage network. Jason and Derek's conspiracy had directly contributed to American military casualties, making their betrayal not just a security breach, but an act of treason that cost lives. During my testimony, I explained how Derek had systematically harassed and terminated qualified cryptographers while positioning unqualified personnel with foreign connections. The tribunal learned that Derek had planned to expand the espionage network by recruiting additional assets throughout the intelligence community. Derek Thompson used his management position to identify and eliminate personnel who might detect security violations while installing assets who would provide ongoing access to classified systems. I testified. My termination was not about performance issues. It was about removing oversight that threatened his espionage operation. Jason's plea bargain negotiations revealed additional details about the conspiracy's scope and methods. Facing life imprisonment for treason, Jason cooperated with investigators by describing how Derek had recruited him, arranged his security clearance, and directed his intelligence-gathering activities. Derek told me this was a short-term operation that would make us both wealthy enough to retire early, Jason admitted during his military tribunal testimony. He said foreign intelligence services were willing to pay millions for access to American encryption systems, and he convinced me that government employees were underpaid for the value of their expertise. Jason's cooperation exposed the methods Derek used to manipulate security clearance investigations, falsify personnel records, and coordinate intelligence transfers with foreign operatives. But prosecutors determined that Jason's cooperation was insufficient to offset the severity of his crimes, especially given the direct connection between his espionage and American military casualties. Sandra from Human Resources was arrested for conspiracy after investigators discovered she had falsified my personnel records and security clearance documentation at Derek's direction. Her cooperation revealed that Derek had corrupted multiple administrative processes to support his espionage activities and eliminate threats to his operation. Derek promised me a promotion and salary increase if I helped him remove problem employees and expedite clearances for his preferred candidates, Sandra testified. I didn't realize I was participating in espionage. I thought I was just helping Derek manage personnel more efficiently. General Patricia Williams, the overall department head, personally apologized for the security failures that had allowed Derek's conspiracy to operate undetected for months. She explained that Derek's private sector background and impressive credentials had initially convinced leadership that he could modernize government operations, but his management methods had actually compromised security protocols. We failed to recognize that Derek's personnel changes were systematically weakening our security posture, General Williams admitted. Frida Martinez's termination should have triggered immediate investigation, but Derek's false documentation about her clearance and performance obscured the true nature of his activities. Media coverage of the espionage arrests portrayed me as the whistleblower whose evidence had exposed a dangerous foreign intelligence operation within American military cryptography. Reporters described how my wrongful termination had actually prevented greater damage by limiting Jason's access to even more sensitive encryption systems. Agent Rodriguez explained that my firing had inadvertently protected a new quantum encryption system that would have given foreign intelligence services access to communications, protecting American special operations worldwide. Derek's impatience to promote Jason actually limited the scope of intelligence compromise because Jason never gained access to the quantum system scheduled for implementation the week after Frida was terminated. The investigation's conclusion revealed that Derek and Jason's espionage network was part of a larger foreign intelligence operation targeting American government employees with financial vulnerabilities. Federal prosecutors used evidence from our case to identify and arrest additional conspirators in other government agencies. Derek Thompson received a sentence of 15 years in federal prison for espionage and treason. Jason Walsh received 20 years after his cooperation agreement was rejected due to the direct connection between his activities and American military casualties. Sandra received 5 years for conspiracy and falsifying government records. The sentences reflected the serious consequences of their betrayal, but more importantly, they sent a clear message that espionage against American national security would be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. 6 weeks after Derek and Jason's arrests, General Patricia Williams called me personally to offer complete reinstatement with enhanced security clearance and expanded authority within the cryptography department. The offer included back pay for my wrongful termination, a formal apology from the department, and a promotion to Chief of Cryptographic Security with oversight responsibilities for multiple facilities. Frida, your integrity and expertise in exposing this espionage network have demonstrated exactly the kind of leadership our department needs, General Williams explained during our meeting at Pentagon offices. We want you to help redesign our security protocols to prevent future insider threats while expanding your role in protecting American military communications worldwide. Returning to work felt surreal after everything that had happened. My former colleagues welcomed me back with genuine respect and appreciation for exposing the conspiracy that had threatened everyone's careers and national security. The atmosphere in the office had completely changed. Fear and suspicion had been replaced with renewed dedication to our mission of protecting American military personnel through secure communications. My first priority as Chief of Cryptographic Security was implementing new monitoring systems to detect unauthorized access to classified information. Working with FBI counterintelligence and military criminal investigators, we developed protocols that would immediately flag suspicious patterns of access or unusual personnel decisions that could indicate insider threats. Colonel Patricia Hayes came out of retirement to serve as my senior advisor, bringing her decades of experience to help rebuild trust and security within our department. Her presence provided continuity and wisdom as we worked to strengthen systems that foreign intelligence services had successfully penetrated. The best defense against future espionage is a workforce that understands both the value of the information they protect and the methods enemies use to exploit vulnerabilities, Patricia explained as we designed new training programs for all personnel. Agent Sarah Rodriguez joined our team as permanent FBI liaison for counterintelligence matters, ensuring that future security concerns would be immediately escalated to appropriate federal investigators. Her ongoing presence provided direct communication channels that would prevent the isolation and dismissal of reports that had allowed Derek's conspiracy to operate undetected. 3 months after my reinstatement, our department held a ceremony recognizing my service and dedication to protecting national security. General Williams presented me with a citation for distinguished civilian service, acknowledging that my persistence in documenting security violations and cooperating with federal investigators had prevented potentially catastrophic intelligence compromises. Frida Martinez exemplifies the integrity and courage that our nation's security depends on, General Williams said during the ceremony. Her willingness to fight for truth and justice, even when it cost her career, protected American military personnel and preserved the security of operations worldwide. The ceremony included presentations by military commanders whose operations had been protected by exposing Derek and Jason's espionage network. Learning that my actions had directly contributed to saving lives made all the harassment and professional attacks I had endured feel worthwhile. But the most meaningful recognition came from the new cryptographers I began training as part of expanded security education programs. These bright, dedicated professionals reminded me why I had chosen this career to serve my country by protecting the communications that keep American military personnel safe in dangerous situations worldwide. Remember that cryptography is not just mathematical formulas and computer systems, I told each new group of trainees. Every encryption key you create and every security protocol you maintain protects real people in real danger. Foreign intelligence services will always try to exploit our systems, and they will always target the people who operate those systems. I emphasized that maintaining security required more than technical expertise. It demanded personal integrity and the courage to report suspicious activities, even when doing so might create professional difficulties. If you ever observe unauthorized access security violations or personnel decisions that seem designed to weaken our defenses, you have a duty to report those concerns through proper channels. Your vigilance and integrity are the foundation of national security. Working in my expanded role, I developed new appreciation for the complexity and importance of the mission we served. Protecting American military communications required constant vigilance against technological threats, human vulnerabilities, and foreign intelligence operations designed to exploit both. But I also learned that the most effective defense against espionage was building a workplace culture where security concerns were taken seriously and personnel felt safe reporting suspicious activities without fear of retaliation. Derek's conspiracy had succeeded partially because he created an environment where questioning his decisions was professionally dangerous. 6 months after returning to work, I received a letter from one of the military commanders whose unit had been protected by exposing the espionage network. He wrote that improved encryption security had enabled successful operations that saved both American and Allied lives in Eastern Europe. Your courage in fighting back against corruption and espionage has had effects far beyond what you might realize, he wrote. American service members are safer today because you refused to accept injustice and fought for truth even when it seemed impossible to win. Reading that letter, I realized that what had initially seemed like the worst professional disaster of my life had actually positioned me to serve a purpose far greater than I could have imagined. Sometimes our greatest challenges become opportunities to discover our true strength and make contributions that extend far beyond our individual careers. The experience taught me that integrity and expertise will ultimately triumph over corruption and deception, but only if we have the courage to fight back when justice demands it. Derek and Jason's conspiracy succeeded for months because they counted on people's fear of professional retaliation to prevent resistance. But truth has a power that corruption cannot ultimately overcome. When we stand up for what's right, even at personal cost, we often discover that we're not alone, that others are waiting for someone to lead the fight for justice and integrity. My journey from wrongful termination to exposing foreign espionage proved that individual courage can protect national security and save lives. Every day in my new role, I work to ensure that future threats are detected and stopped before they can harm the American military personnel who depend on our systems for their safety and success. Have you ever faced a situation where standing up for what's right seemed to threaten everything you'd worked for? I'd love to hear about times when you found the courage to fight back against injustice, even when the odds seemed impossible. Your experiences might inspire someone else who's facing their own difficult decision about doing the right thing. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it reminds you that integrity and persistence can overcome even the most sophisticated betrayal, and that sometimes our worst professional setbacks position us to make our greatest contributions. If you found this story meaningful, please like this video, subscribe for more stories about overcoming workplace injustice, and share it with anyone who might need encouragement to stand up for truth. Remember, your courage to do what's right might protect and inspire more people than you'll ever know.